Hello, Year 9. Something different for you this week. From next week, the whole of Year 9 are going to be doing these recorded lessons on Paper 1. So we just need to pause for this week to allow the other groups to catch up. So this week, they'll be doing the lesson that you did last week. We pause this week, do this activity, and then next week we all catch up. We all start from lesson 2 on paper 1, the reading section of the GCSE. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at the flip side of that. So we're focusing on the reading, but there is a writing section that carries 50% of paper 1. And if you have a look at the slide, there's a brief outline then of what happens on that writing paper. And you'll be familiar with it already because we have touched on this with our narrative writing. And I think we've done some descriptive writing of setting as well. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So you'll remember that you get a picture, stimulus, and the choice of 2 tasks. Often one is narrative, a story task, and the other is a description of a setting. And there's an option to pick up the, sorry, I'm just looking at my slide actually rather than making it up off the top of my head. There's a written stimulus as well. So you've got the picture of the train, write a description suggested by this picture, or you've got write the opening part of a story about a place that is severely affected by the weather. We're going to be focusing on that aspect of describing a setting, and we're still going to link it to our novel, The Explorer. Okay then, so you can see the lesson objective is, can I structure a description of a setting and use language and sentence varieties effectively? So let's start with the second half of that, using language and sentence variety effectively. I want you to have a look at the images you've got. You've got a picture image there of some kind of ruined Aztec Mayan settlement in the Amazon forest. And at the bottom, not quite so clearly I'm afraid, you've got 2 original illustrations from the novel, The Explorer. So have a look at those. And you're going to be writing 8 sentences, and you can pause after I've described each one to give you enough time to write them. They don't have to be linking sentences, but use the images to help you. So sentence number 1 is going to be to write a sentence that uses a simile, and if you remember, a simile creates a comparison between 2 things, saying like or as. So you might say you might write, like thick ropes, the vines hung from the trees above me. So like or as. Number 2, I want you to use alliteration. Alliteration is when you repeat the letter sound in a series of words, and it can have different effects. So you might want to create a hissing or shushing sound by using the sibilant form of alliteration, or you might want to use a plosive sound to create a dramatic effect like a b or a t or a p. So have a look at the images and think about the object, the detail you want to describe, and how many other words you could tie into that using the same initial letter. So write one with alliteration. Sentence number 3, I want you to work on imagery, and in particular, remember, don't get fooled into thinking the imagery is all about images, because it's not. It's about the whole senses, and we've got 5 different human senses. A lot of the time people will concentrate on what can be seen, but I would like you to write a sentence using either auditory imagery, the sound, or olfactory, smell. So if you were stood in this place, what would be the smells that you could smell? And you might want to combine both of those for sentence number 3. Sentence number 4, I want you to use an exclamation. So an exclamation is often used for shock or surprise. It might be used to emphasize a particularly loud noise or something like that. And then sentence number 5, really simple, effective way of creating drama in your work is very short sentences. So think of something dramatic and write a sentence with 4 words. And sentence number 6, I want you to develop one idea in detail, and I want you to write a sentence with 10 words in it. Sentence number 7, a sentence that starts with a preposition. I'll have to change that. The slide I'm looking at says proposition, which would be very different. A preposition tells you where something is in place or time. So it might be later that afternoon or at night time. or it could be, you know, on top of the boulder, next to the tree. So it tells you where things are. And then sentence number 8 is a sentence that starts with an adverb, generally ly words. So suddenly, unfortunately, slowly, remarkably, astoundingly. You could choose an adverb and then start the sentence using that particular word. So moving on to the main task then, the children in the novel go on an amazing adventure along the Amazon River in the hope that they might reach the nearest city. So they build a raft and they set sail down the Amazon. Eventually they come to a particular place in the jungle and they discover the ruins of a city. So your task is going to be to continue the description that I will read in a second of the ancient ruined city that they have discovered, and to write somewhere between 4 and 6 linked paragraphs. Okay, so have a close look at the picture again. That can help you with a bit of inspiration, just like on paper when you get a picture stimulus. But if I just read the text from the novel below. They stood with their backs to a slope at the edge of a vast expanse of stone. It was an enormous stone courtyard, as wide as a hayfield and at least 4 times as long. My God, breathed Lilia. And then you're going to describe what they're seeing that causes such kind of awe and amazement in the character Lilia. So remember I said you want to write between 4 and 6 linked paragraphs. Can you think of 3 different ways you can continue a description of a setting and create that linking between the paragraphs? Just jot down some ideas. Give yourself 30 seconds. So here are 5 different ways in which you can create a sense of linked paragraphs. One technique is the zoom in or the zoom out. Now the zoom in would be to start your first paragraph describing something very, very big. So it could be the sky above you or the canopy of trees. And then in each paragraph, you get slowly more and more focused on increasingly smaller things, so that your very final paragraph you want to aim to focus on something that's, you know, tiny, that's big enough to hold in your hand. It could be you know, the colour of the sand beneath your feet, or a particular pebble, or perhaps you see a small creature or an insect or something like that. If you think about the way films work, films often do this, don't they? The camera shots start big and then get increasingly smaller. Or you can reverse that. You can start with a tiny thing and then slowly, it's called pan out to the big setting. And so you can plan somewhere between 4 and 6 paragraphs that way. The other thing you can do, technique number 2, it's all right. It's not the one I would rush to do, but what you can do, I already said about imagery being the 5 different senses. So you can use each paragraph to focus on a particular thing. So if you think, you know, you might start off with the descriptions of the sounds around you and then notice the smells. Then you might focus on kinesthetic imagery, which is temperature and texture, things that you can feel with your hand. Maybe you run your hand along the stone carvings. You've got sight, obviously, the things that you can see. And I always manage to forget the final one. What have I said so far? So sight, sound, smell. Oh, taste. Taste is a difficult one. But perhaps there is some fruit that you taste. Perhaps there's a taste of fear in your mouth. And I always think that having talked so much about the physical side, a really good final paragraph is to bring it back into yourself. So almost create a 6th sense of your internal thoughts and feelings in reaction to all the things that you're looking at. The reason I'm hesitant about this is you have to be really careful that each paragraph doesn't just become a list. I can hear this, blah, blah, blah. I can also hear this, blah, blah, blah. I can hear this as well. And you have to be a lot more creative and imaginative and think about, you know, how those sentences are going to link together. Technique number 3 is the journey. So you've got to imagine yourself walking through. So if you have a look at the picture, then try and first of all take yourself outside of the picture and think about, how you approach this particular area, and then maybe imagine yourself walking through, climbing over the rocks on the left hand side, getting up to the door, maybe even stepping into the door, so that each paragraph moves you along the journey. Number 4, the preposition is a little bit more like that, but almost imagine yourself rooted in the middle of the picture. And we said prepositions are things in place or time. So you can use very, very simple connectives at the start of each paragraph, underneath my feet, on my left, to my right, above me, in front of me. And that just helps to give each paragraph a real focus and obviously connect those paragraphs as well. And then number 5 is the time change. So imagine that the easiest thing to do here is either the sun is coming up or the sun is setting, and each paragraph is linked by those changes in time. So, how would that place alter and shift and change if it got increasingly darker, or if the sun was rising and with the light coming up you could see different things. So 5 different ways that you can create really interesting structure in your writing there. Which technique are you going to use, and why are you going to use this particular technique? Okay, so you're going to begin to plan your work now. And the first thing I want you to do is really focus on that idea of linking paragraphs and making sure that the opening sentence of each of your 4 or 5 paragraphs is really going to be focused and is going to give you that linked structure. So think about the technique that you were using. Was it going to be the journey, or zoom in, zoom out? And I just want you to think about what the first sentence of each of your paragraphs is going to be. So pause the video while you do that first of all. Right, now that you've got all of your sentences, think about the fact that a good paragraph is going to be created out of a collection of linked sentences. So, yes, there is room for paragraphing effect. Yes, there is room for very short, maybe one sentence, even one word paragraphs somewhere. But generally, you want to be pushing yourself to extend and develop your ideas. So for each of your 4 to 6 paragraphs, jot down what you're going to include in that particular paragraph, and remember to stay focused on the idea that you've introduced in your topic sentence, the first sentence of your paragraph. So again, pause the video while you just add some notes to each paragraph. And then, what mature, adventurous and effective vocabulary could you also include? Now, if you want to really push yourself, I've added a vocab list to class charts, so you could have a quick look through that, and you could think 2 words in each paragraph. And if there are words that you've come across in that list that you don't know the meaning of, again, really challenge yourself and find out what they mean. Could they be applicable? You can also use the thesaurus or synonyms feature if you're typing your work. So you think about a word, maybe darkening, and then you right click on that word, and when you see the synonyms drop down menu, you can think about different words that might be really useful for that. So if I do that now, I've just opened my Word document. Let me type darkening. I've right clicked on it. I've got synonyms, and I've got deepening, dimming, blackening, obscuring. So I'm looking for a word that's going to be slightly better than the one I've chosen. So, obscuring could be an interesting one to use, couldn't it? So have a go at that. Also, return to our starter activity and think about similes, alliteration. You might want to go further and include some other language devices like personification, metaphors. And again, think about sentence variety. Jot down all the punctuation devices that you are comfortable using. So, should be happy with full stops, commas, exclamation marks, question marks, ellipsis, brackets. Can you use colons and semicolons effectively? So you can really push yourself to say, right, in that paragraph I'm going to structure a sentence with a colon, in that paragraph I'm going to use an ellipsis. So you've got the full range of punctuation going on as well. So pause the video while you finish your notes off then. So using the notes that you've made now, have a look at this quick success criteria and keep this in front of you as you're writing, making sure that you have used varied vocabulary, you've made language choices, you've deliberately used language devices and selected individual words and phrases based on your audience and purpose. You've structured and varied your paragraphs. That shouldn't be a problem because we've done all that in the planning. You've developed your ideas. Remember what I said about linking sentences in a paragraph to really get depth and detail. You've got varied sentence types, really long ones, really short ones, one-word ones, as well as using a range of punctuation. That punctuation is accurate and you've done your best to make sure that your spellings are correct. So give yourself around 30 minutes then to write a really successful piece of descriptive writing. Now you've completed your piece of descriptive writing, you could get somebody else to do this for you if there's somebody else at home, or you could do it yourself. Return to the success criteria and give yourself a red, amber, green. So green is you've done it brilliantly, really successfully. That's a really strong feature of your writing. Amber is, yeah, I've done that a little bit. You know, I can see it in places in my work. And red is, haven't used that at all. So, for example, if you only used full stops in your piece of work, you couldn't really give yourself amber or green for the varied punctuation. So have a look through your work, and then that will generate your own EBI, won't it? So if you realise after writing it that you didn't use any language devices, or you didn't use sentence variety, then using a different colour pen or a different colour in Word, if you're typing it, you can add those things in before you send them to your teacher. And then finally, I thought it might be nice to hear the actual description from the book. So, they stood with their backs to a slope at the edge of a vast expanse of stone. It was an enormous stone courtyard, as wide as a hayfield and at least 4 times as long. The ground was built from white and yellow stone blocks, rough hewn but smooth at the top, as from the passing of many thousands of feet. It was set in a slight dip in the ground, so the earth rose up from it on all sides, forming a natural wall. Down the middle of the great stone courtyard grew 2 rows of trees, creating a boulevard. There were heaps of stone in 5 or 6 places, as if small houses had lined each side. "My God," breathed Lilia. Fred took a step forward. Among the trees he could see half-formed stone pillars, some waist-height, some taller than he was. High overhead was a thick canopy of green, forming a roof over the courtyard. "Look," said Fred, "over there." At the far end was a vast stone wall, half crumbling and covered in passion fruit vines. Lining the wall were 4 immense sculptures, hewn out of wood and stone and taller than 2 men. Some of the stone had fallen away, but it was possible to see what they had been: a monkey, a panther, a woman and a man. "It's a city," breathed Lilia. The sudden thump of a footstep made Fred spin round, bending down, as he had done days before, for something to throw. A man stepped from behind one of the stone pillars. He was pointing a knife at them. "Whatever you were thinking of doing," he said, "I would advise against it."